Danish Crowner! What's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite TV shows, and today I'm going to do a review on Dark Season 1. Dark is a Netflix German TV show created by Baron Bo Odar and his wife Jantje Friese, and it's a horror TV show about time traveling, which is why kids and teens are disappearing left and right. The opening sequence is just okay, but I love that it sets the moody tone of the series itself, and I actually think the directing of the show feels really mature and really nice. There's an eerie atmosphere in the story which reminds me a lot of Twin Peaks. Episode 1, Geheimnisse or Secrets, is just an alright opening. The first half an hour is filled with these choppy scenes showing us all these characters, and it's really difficult to follow how these characters are related, but given how complicated this show is about to become, the first episode being very slow and indulgent is very, very normal. Basically, this teenager, Eric, had been missing for 14 days in the German town of Winden. Everyone's panicking and the cops hadn't found any evidence yet. Then we have Jonas, another teenager whose father committed suicide and whose mother, Hannah, is a widow, who's having an affair with Ulrich, who's a cop, and whose wife is the principal of a high school, whose name is Katharina, which Jonas and every other teenager goes to. Ulrich has 3 kids, Magnus, Marta, and Mikkel. Magnus is dating Franziska, and Marta is dating Bartosz, who is also Jonas' friend. And also Marta and Jonas dated before Marta and Bartosz dated. And then we have Mikkel, and Mikkel is the smallest kid. So one day Jonas went to school and met his friend and those 3 kids of Ulrich and Ulrichs. I need to stop butchering German words. And they had an idea to steal Eric's weed. When they did that, Mikkel suddenly disappeared. And all at the same time, Jonas's dad's suicide letter is opened because it is instructed to be opened after the exact same time Mikkel has disappeared. So episode 1 is slow and indulgent, but it had definitely piqued my interest. Episode 2 is Lügel, or Lies, and it's another really slow and indulgent episode. We have a lot of new leads. There's a random unidentified dead body of a boy found in the woods wearing clothes and shoes from the year 1986 specifically. And apparently Mikkel's uncle Mads also disappeared a long time ago, and both Mikkel and Mads also disappeared near the nuclear power plant, and there's a cave that leads to a locked door that belongs to the power plant, so now we all know that the power plant is somehow behind all this. Eric's dad works at the power plant. Eric's dad is, I forgot his name. And his boss's name is Alexander, told him to zip his mouth and denied all the police search warrants. So something fishy is going on. Jonas also tried to look for clues in his dad's room and found a map to a cave that leads to the power plant. All at the same time, Mikkel's granddad is doing something very fishy and hiding something. Mikkel's granddad, aka Ulrich's dad, is Tronte. And all at the same time, there's this mysterious man in a hoodie, the stranger, that probably knows about all this. And at the very, very end of the episode, we have a pretty interesting scene where we see Mikkel wake up and find himself in the year 1986. And even though it's not a very interesting episode, I think it's going to lead into something interesting. Over to episode 3, Gestern und Heute, or Past and Present. And it's a pretty solid episode. It's not very plot driven, but the entirety of the episode is basically what happened to Mikkel in 1986, and that alone is already kind of interesting. There are some scenes in 1986 that I'm not that interested in, like this woman Claudia Tiedemann being the new boss of the power plant, and apparently Claudia Tiedemann is the mother of Regina Tiedemann, who is this hotel owner in 2019, who's also the wife of Alexander Tiedemann, who is the CEO of the power plant in 2019. So keep that in mind. A bunch of sheep and birds died because of the energy consumed for time travel, or at least that's a theory. And then we have the Mikkel scenes, Mikkel meeting his dad and mom in their teen years and realizing that he's in 1986 and not in 2019. He just went 33 years back in time. The characters got kind of confusing as to who in 1986 is who in 2019, but at the end we got a little montage reminding us of who is who, and at the end Mikkel tried to go back to the cave where he woke up, which is really reasonable. Usually where you go into somewhere is where you exit somewhere, but he didn't succeed, of course. Episode 4 is titled Doppelleben, or Double Life, which is a play on words because we have Charlotte, who is the police woman, and Ulrich is also a policeman in 2019, and Charlotte Doppel is the wife of Peter Doppel, and their only daughter is their elder daughter is Franziska, who is dating Magnus, and their younger daughter is Elizabeth, who is a mute and goes to a mute school, or mute/deaf school. Anyways, Charlotte Doppel found out that the disappearance of Mikkel Nielsen, so we have Ulrich Nielsen, Tronte Nielsen, Magnus Mata Nielsen, Katharina Nielsen. Mikkel Nielsen is connected to her husband, Peter Doppel. But other than that, this is another really slow and shrouded episode that gives off bits of clues here and there. We have this stranger named Noah who gave Doppel's daughter Elizabeth a watch, and at the same time Peter Doppel's dad Helge said he wanted to stop a man named Noah. This stranger also appears to be stalking Jonas and is secretly helping him, not much else. Then we have episode 5, Wahrheit, or Truth, where things start to happen. First of all, we have Noah, who's apparently the villain, the ultimate villain, who showed up to Bartosz, pretending to be Eric's drug dealer. Then we have the stranger, who I guessed may be one of the good guys, I wasn't sure, but he helped Jonas and gave Jonas his dad's letter, the letter his dad wrote before suicide, which contained a very huge and powerful revelation. Aside from that, I really don't care about Ulrich's affairs that much. It does create complications, but they just don't interest me all that much. But still, we see both 1986 and 2019 at the same time, and it's cool that we can draw some parallels, so it is the most interesting episode so far. Over to episode 6, Sic Mundus Creatus Est, or thus the world is created. Thus the world created is. And this is actually the most interesting episode so far. The pace is finally picking up, despite having a few scenes not really related to the big thing, like Katharina figuring out that Ulrich is having an affair with Hannah, or the whole Bartosz trying to speak to Marta thing. It's only on this episode do I realize that Bartosz is Regina and Alexander's son, which is Tiedemann. So Tiedemann, Nielsen, Kanwald, Hanna Kanwald, and Jonas Kanwald. The two big things in this episode is Ulrich starting to suspect his dad to be involved in things, and indeed his dad and Peter Doppel knows things that others don't. Meanwhile, he began to realize the real identity of the dead boy found in episode 1. Next, we have the stranger secretly helping Jonas, and Jonas following his instructions, and minor spoiler alert, but Jonas kinda time traveled. Yeah. Except I'm a little curious as to why. If Mikkel in the future had already met that fate, what does Jonas have to do? Like, it's not like he can change the future, right? Because then it would not make any sense. He's going back and to just observe, maybe? I really don't know. But if I was Jonas and I know that I can't do anything, I would still go back and check out, hey, you know, what are the 80s like? You know, let's find out. Next is episode 7, Kreuzwege, or Crossroads. And it's a pretty interesting episode, but also a very, very slow one. The interesting bits are in 1986. I don't want to spoil much, but Jonas kinda figured it out. Except he couldn't do anything but just to observe, which is kind of sad, but that's what he's gotta do, I guess. Then we have Ulrich, who started to connect the dots and realized that time travel is involved in all these kidnapping, and realized that it has something to do with Helge Doppler, Peter Doppler's dad. It's just weird that Helge, back in 1986, seems to be on Noah's side, and now in 2019, he says he needs to stop Noah, because he finally realized that Noah is a big baddie. So something must have happened. Again, this is a really slow and indulgent episode, but still a bit interesting. My only gripe is that some scenes are just too short. They're like 20 seconds long and that's it. Over to episode 8, Was man sät, das wird man ernten, which is as a man reaps, he sows. Whatever man reaps, whatever the man sows. And this is another episode that I consider the most interesting so far. We are presented with a whole new year, 1953. Basically what happened was that one of the characters from 2019, not spoiling who, found out about the portal, and since there were two ways, he took the wrong way to 1953 instead of 1986, and not only is everything very refreshing and interesting, seeing how shocking it is for the character is crazy, but what hits the hardest is that the character didn't care about preserving the timeline and kept on trying to change the future, which is a terrible, terrible idea. Other than that, we also have a lot of scenes where the stranger speaks to a scientist who is also a Tiedemann, apparently. So we have Claudia, who became the power plant CEO in 1986. Claudia's daughter is Regina, and Regina's husband, Alexander, is the power plant CEO in 2019. Claudia's dad is the first person to open the power plant in 1953. And somehow the clockmaker scientist guy is also related because he's also a Tiedemann. And Bartosz Tiedemann is Regina's son. So Claudia is Bartosz's grandma, and the first guy to open the power plant is Bartosz's great-grandpa. Actually, you know what? I made a mistake. Claudia's dad is Egon Tiedemann, who is the police officer, who is the old police officer. And the guy who started the power plant is not a Tiedemann, I think. It's too complicated. I don't even know what's going on. And then we have Agnes Tiedemann, who is the wife of Egon Tiedemann. So Egon is Bartosz's great-grandpa, and Agnes is Bartosz's great-grandma. And Agnes became friends with a Nielsen, Tronte's mom. Mikkel's dad is Ulrich, Ulrich's dad is Tronte's mom. Anyways, these scenes are really short and strange. The penultimate episode is episode 9, Alles ist jetzt, or All is Now, and it's the first episode where we have 3 ongoing times at the same time: 1953, 1986, and 2019. So yes, it's super freaking confusing. But also it is definitely intriguing to see how Ulrich is handling the situation, since he made some really questionable decisions. I'm also interested in how Helge came to be, what his plans and motives are. Also Noah. Apparently Noah was already able to time travel in 1953 because he's from 1953, because apparently Tronte's mom, aka Mikkel's dad, Ulrich's dad, Tronte's mom's dad is Noah. Tronte's dad is Noah. That's what I'm trying to say. Tronte's dad is Noah. Tronte's mom's husband is Noah. So Tronte's dad is Noah. So Noah's from a long time ago. So he's got to be time traveling, right? And he still shows up in 2019 like it's nothing. Hannah is being such a bitch. If Noah is the main villain, Hannah has to be the sub-villain. She's just a pathological liar and a really manipulative person. She just lies through her teeth. We also see a bit of Jonas and Marta, and it was awkward. And we see a bit of Magnus and Franziska, and something's going on, but we sort of don't know what's going on. And the season's over, and we still don't know what's going on with Franziska. We learn how Alexander, aka Regina's husband, came to be, how he worked for Claudia, and how we see Claudia showing up in 2019 and then going to 1953 to help the clockmaker make his first time travel machine. Very confusing, but I'm still catching on, I guess. At last, we have episode 10, Alpha and Omega, and it's a very eventful episode. It doesn't answer a lot of questions, it just raises more questions. And on top of that, we also got a few revelations. It's hard to pinpoint exactly which few storylines are happening, but to start off, we have Jonas, whose motives in this episode is to go to 1986 and save Mikkel despite risking his existence. He sort of failed and was stuck in a terrible predicament, but another situation happened which sort of teleported him to 2052, which is insane. Everything's broken, abandoned, it's basically a nuclear winter. We have the stranger, whose identity is revealed after retrieving his black hole time machine from H.G. Tiedemann, the clockmaker, in 1986, remained in 1986, and tried to destroy the time travel portal in 1986, which didn't go as well. We have old Helga from 2019 went to 1986 to tell adult Helga to stop working with Noah, which also ended up poorly, and we got a pretty sudden scene. We have another character stuck in 1953. If you know who, you know who. I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, and he's still stuck, and I really hope he manages to survive and go back. All at the same time, Charlotte is still piecing everything together. Bartosz is now a bad person, and Hannah is also very bad. And I guess that's the episode. It's still very confusing, and it requires a lot of brain energy to try to keep up who is who and what's going on, but it's still fairly entertaining. But what's the even bigger issue is that in this episode we see Jonas, the stranger, Helga, and Ulrich try to change the future, but all of them failing, which means that they can't change the future. Whatever happened, happened. It's like Prisoner of Azkaban. Everything had to happen, and everyone are only playing a pawn in a chess of games, serving the master of time. Caught in a time loop over and over and over again, and everything just forces itself to make sense. So, I don't know. They just can't seem to change the future. Everything's already set. Everything's already set. Everything has to happen. It's like destiny, basically. Overall, Dark has a very, very interesting premise, and I'm glad someone finally decided to make a TV show solely about time travel. It's like Primer, but turned into a scary TV show, and it's awesome. A lot of people compare this to Lost, but honestly, this is more similar to Twin Peaks than it is to Lost. The very eerie atmosphere of the forests, the strange people connections, it's quite Twin Peaks-esque. It requires a lot of brain power to keep track of who is who and what's going on in which year, and that's not a problem. My problem is that some scenes are so short it barely has any message, even if it has more of a message sometime afterward. Aside from that, some episodes are just kind of slow, and it's really difficult to pinpoint which storylines are more important and which storylines aren't. Like, we have a lot of romance going on, and that's not as interesting comparing to the other storylines, like trying to save someone by going back in time. But still, I think it's still a very thought-provoking TV show, and whoever wrote this show, Baran Bo-Odar, I think, has a big brain. That, or he just has a lot of time. My favorite episode is probably the finale, or whatever you reap, you sow. And my least favorite is probably Doppelleben. I'm saying Dark Season 1 is mind-blowing, and I'm giving it a strong 7 to a light 8 out of 10. Cheers. So, have you seen Dark Season 1? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like if you like it, subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching.